This game looked a little spooky to me, but I was still interested despite my hate for spooky things, if not only because of the mixed reviews it had on Steam. It's a point-and-click puzzle game made in Unreal Engine by a team of 9 students from FH Salzburg, which is the short version of Salzburg University of Applied Sciences in Austria. I'll start with my pedantic point. There were a couple of spelling errors or grammar mistakes, but overall the text is well translated. The controls are basic, with it being a point and click, and the game doesn't explain its story, zooming you from the menu area into the first room straight away. The game first of all told me not to go into the dark areas due to monsters, which would have been scarier if there were any consequences to going into the shadows or any hints of monsters for you to see, rather than the game just refusing to let you into the shadows at any time you attempted to. I then clicked the other attention-grabbing thing in the room, which was a boy sat on the floor. The game told me his name is Lucien, and I found out that I'm looking for my brother, but he hasn't seen him, though he'll help me get out the house with his fire powers, but that I have to carry him. So he jumps into the inventory, and from there you can click on him and other stuff to set them on fire, including inanimate objects that the game gives you achievements for burning, which I did enjoy quite a bit. No comments on the fact that my first reaction was to just burn everything in the room. Lucien's power is not limited by range, so you can light candles with it to scare away the dark and burn stuff at distance. The first room is an attic, and you basically have to find a way to open the trapdoor to get out. The game has a bit of a struggle with where it wants you to be to interact with things. Sometimes it will refuse to let you get to things because you're either too far away or not high enough, but then you do something which gets you higher up, though nowhere near high enough still, considering you're about 8 inches tall, and suddenly that's perfectly okay. I thought you'd have to climb up the bookcase to put stuff in the birdcage in the first level, but apparently you don't have to, although there are multiple ways to use the objects in the first level to solve it. You get an achievement if you don't use all of the objects and carry them all the way to the end, though you need 2 run-throughs to carry all the excess objects to the end once. You'd have to do 2 in one run and then the final one in another. On escaping the first room, you drop into a bathroom, where you meet another child called Izumi. She tells you that there's a secret passage to escape the bathroom, since there's not an obvious door, and she has water powers that are also distance unlimited. I managed to solve this room kind of by accident, since I wasn't sure where the secret door was until I opened it and was just messing around with stuff pretty much. During my messing, I had an unfortunate hairdryer malfunction that ended in it clipping out the room and into the floor. This would have been fine if it were in the right place, but sadly it wasn't, and it meant I couldn't pick it up anymore and had to start from the beginning again. The game doesn't save between levels, by the way, so if anything does go wrong, then you do have to start all the way from the first room. With it being a puzzle game, it's not the end of the world, since once you've figured it out once, that's it, but even still, it's time that you don't need to spend. On my second run, I passed the bathroom level by more careful messing that didn't involve me losing a hairdryer into the shadow realm, and graduated to the third level. This one explained itself a bit better, with lights on the floor in a basement leading me to another child, Jiven, who can grow vines out of set spots on the floor or plant pots. Above him was a fuse box, and in a box on the right was a fuse, and I may not be the cleverest, but even I can add 2 and 2 to make 4 sometimes. During my interactions in the basement, I found another glitch, where I ended up stood on top of the fuse in the box, and on burning the web to free it and take it out, I then got myself stuck in the box. There is no way to get out. There's a sloped plank on the way up to it that you can get high enough to fall into the box, but the game will refuse to let you out, so restart number 2. The basement also has problems with your character's positioning, where the candles on the floor become obstacles to your character and you can try to interact with an object across the room, but as your character tries to get closer to the object to perform the interaction, they'll just start spazzing out. This also happens if you try and get too close to an object or an obstacle. Weirdly, it doesn't seem to happen in any other room but this one. Maybe it's just the objects on the floor thing that it doesn't like. On escaping the basement, you arrive in the kitchen, where you find the last child, Kimya. To speak to Kimya, you end up going to a part of the kitchen that's pretty dark, Again, the game hasn't seemed to have decided how dark the darkness has to be for you to go into to be victim to the monsters. But anyway. Kimya has gravity powers. She can float or pull objects, and you use this on the seesaw to get yourself into the actual kitchen, since you can't use the door. You don't need to use the box to balance out the seesaw if you walk fast enough, which I don't think you're meant to be able to do, but now I have access to gravity powers, I also have the power to defy them. In this one, you find 4 tokens to escape, and on doing so you find your brother, whose name is Mercy. So long as there is mercy. Get it? Spoiler for the ending, I am going to spoil it because I need to talk about it, but one of you has to stay behind in the house because the other can't escape without a soul sacrifice, so you get to choose between yourself, your name is Spay by the way, or your brother. The reason I have to spoil that is because I want to comment on the story. It's explained a bit, but not really that deeply. There's no information onto how or why you got into the house. I guess you could say you don't remember how, but the other children seem to have memories from before they got into the house. Lucian asks if Mummy sent us here, and when you collect all the kids... That sounds kind of weird, but anyway. When you collect all the kids, you can right-click on them to get their story. Combined, it seems that there's a woman who they all call the Lady, who came into their life as a partner to their parent, some of whom were rich, and outcasted the child in the process. As a result of the outcasting, it seems that the kids ended up in this spooky house, or maybe the woman kidnapped them there. There's no mention of the lady by our character. There's no mention of anything, actually, since you don't speak. You've probably also noticed, if you've seen anything from it, that this game smells a lot like Little Nightmares, where you have a teeny little protagonist going through spooky buildings solving puzzles to escape. The character design is also that kind of Coraline, creepy, disproportioned child style, so I have a feeling the plot is a distilled off piece of Little Nightmares' plot. I know there's a lady in Little Nightmares as well, so maybe it's a bit too close of a robbery, but this game is vague enough to not really explain a few parts of the story. What is this house? Who is the lady you never see? If you need a soul sacrifice to leave, did all of these other kids come in with another child despite never mentioning siblings? Your character doesn't become a ghosty husk like the other kids during the transit through, and neither does Mercy, so surely giving up your soul is what makes the difference. Did the other kids give theirs up for kicks? They can sit in the shadows without any issue, so are they the monsters the game was warning me about, or are they just immune to them? Do I get cool superpowers by staying in the house and becoming a ghost? And why do all the kids that only promise they'll help me through the house if I take them with me then suddenly decide at the end that they can't come with me because they've been in the house too long? The game does pretty well to introduce the new powers, and in some puzzles you could use one of 2 elements to fulfill the same role, and there's always use for the earlier powers since Lucian is your firelighter, and Izumi's power pretty much does one of 2 things outside of the bathroom you find her in, but at least they are still needed. The visuals are good. As said, the darkness unfortunately isn't as scary as it could have been if there was actually something that jumped out for you when you went into it, or some glimmer of something moving in the shadow maybe. The scariest thing in the whole playthrough was this toilet roll configuration. Disgusting. The first puzzle was the hardest out of all of them, for me at least. Maybe because of my lack of understanding as to what your reach distance was and being blind. The second level wasn't particularly intuitive unless you were clever enough to figure out where the exit passageway was before you started clicking on everything that you could move or burn. Once you knew where the exit was, it made sense, but if you didn't, it was just kind of clicking stuff. The third stage with the fuses was a much easier one, and the final one was easy too once you realised there were several similar looking things visible around the room. Some of the bad reviews complain that the puzzles were too hard with little direction, but I'm not sure how much I agree with that since your mouse highlights every object even in the dark when you hover over it, so it's kind of hard to miss stuff that you need. The complaints about glitches are a bit more valid. I would say they're not game-breaking, but they did require me to restart the game in its entirety due to lack of save points. Do you lose a lot of time this way? Not really. If you don't know what you're doing, I'd guesstimate that the game will take about 20 to 25 minutes. If you do, it can take about 10. I think it makes a difference how powerful your PC is, but I was running the game on ultra graphics and I had only small glitches. The music is good for the atmosphere too. It differs for each level, and there are sound effects in the background of some of them to add to it. The general sound effects are good, matching to their objects well, and footsteps change depending on the surface. Would I say the game deserves a negative review? From my experience, no. It could do with being a bit more stable in some aspects and having a more substantial threat to give me any sense of hesitation about diving into the monster-infested shadows. The story is just about pieced together just enough to have a basic level motivation of getting out the house so you don't turn into a ghost child, although you only turn into a ghost child when trying to leave the house, but anyway. You need to leave and find your brother, and that's enough to get you through a 20-minute playthrough. There is replayability worth maybe 2 extra goes in trying to get the achievements for burning all the objects, spiderwebs, and carrying excess items into the final room to show your brother, and it's not too hard to 100% it. The game luckily doesn't allow you to keep so many extra items that you can't pick anything up anymore. It's a good looking game and does a fair job of getting towards a creepy atmosphere with the music and character design, and the puzzles seem to get easier and generally make sense apart from continuity and reach distance. All in all, I would give So Long as There Is Mercy a 6.5 out of 10.